Looking at our world from a theological perspective. This is the Theology Central Podcast, making theology central.
Good morning, everyone. It is Saturday, April the 24th, 2021. It is currently 9:11 a.m. Central Time. Police shootings. If you just say those two words, police shootings, and you are within a group of individuals or you are around a group of individuals, immediately everyone is going to jump into that conversation. You just mentioned police shootings and everyone around you is going to jump into that conversation. They are going to have opinions. They're going to have perspectives. At times they're going to get maybe even very animated and emotional. Everyone has something to say when you just mention those two words, police shootings. Now, sometimes as you listen to people, you will realize that they are speaking more from the perspective of emotion and not facts. Sometimes you will realize that people have definitely not done any meaningful research. Sometimes you will realize that people clearly seem to be wanting to promote a narrative and a very specific perspective and ignore any other details and ignore any other facts. But the bottom line is you just say the words police shooting and you're going to get a response. Now, here I sit this morning in front of this microphone, and I'm going to talk about police shootings, and guess what? Anyone who listens to this, they're going to immediately want to react. And here's what I ask of you. I ask you to listen to everything I have to say. Listen to it carefully. Listen to it thoughtfully. And listen to it don't listen to it just to say, oh, he doesn't agree with my perspective, he's wrong. Listen to it to really consider everything that I have to say. And here's what I promise you. I'm going to do my very best to speak carefully, calmly. I'm going to try to choose my words, I'm going to try to be very specific with the words that I choose. I'm going to try. Now, typically when I speak, if you've ever listened to me, I can be very animated, right? I can be very animated. I can get very loud. Sometimes my emotion comes through, but I'm going to try to set all of that aside to look at this very important topic and to do so carefully, thoughtfully, and rationally. And one of the things we're going to try to do in this discussion is I want to demonstrate to you, sadly, how sometimes the media gets involved in these situations and they do not help. In fact, in many cases, they hurt. They make the situation worse because in many cases, it appears the media has an agenda and everything as well, which does not help at all. What you want from the media is not an agenda. Well, I take that back. You want them to have an agenda, but you want that agenda to be truth. That's what you want. You want them to be pursuing truth no matter where it leads. They don't have a side. They don't pick a side. They just say, what are the facts? Here are the facts as we know them. They're not picking a side about who's going to use those facts for what purpose. No, all they want to do is report the facts. But sadly, that doesn't always occur. And when that doesn't occur, then guess what? That creates a narrative. And once the narrative is created, then sadly, the truth is typically obscured. All right, let me state that again. Once a narrative is created, the truth is usually obscured. The truth becomes hidden because all now everyone can see is their narrative, their perspective, their side. And what we should care about is finding the truth. All right, so here's how we're going to proceed. I'm going to give you some basic thoughts and how you should try in your own mind, whenever you hear of a police-involved shooting or the police using some kind of force that results in someone dying, there is a process that I think you should go through and how to ensure that you are not manipulated by the media, how you do not fall for a fraudulent narrative, but how you can proceed with caution. And there's a process you can go through to try to get to the facts. Whenever there's a police-involved shooting or the police use some form of deadly force that results in someone dying, there is a process I think everyone needs to learn, and we need to walk through this. So we're going to walk through those steps. Here, and I'm not going to necessarily name any specific examples, but I'm just going to say, here is a police shooting. Here's how you proceed. And this can work for any major story. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be a police shooting. These steps can be used for a lot of different major events where there's whatever the major event is, there's some basic steps that people can use. And I think it will be very helpful. Then we're going to look at a very specific shooting that took place in Ohio with Ma'Khia Bryant, 16-year-old Ma'Khia Bryant, who was killed by police. We're going to look at that very specific shooting because it's getting so much media attention. And then we're going to conclude by just looking at what the media does and what that ultimately can lead to. Look, when the media, it's very important, when the media does not conduct itself in a correct manner and it creates a situation where people do not trust the media, then that places people in a situation where they have to go look somewhere else to find information. And then you are leaving them up to try to find which source to believe and which source they shouldn't believe. If they can't trust the media, who can they trust? Which this leads to all kinds of misinformation and leads to only bigger problems. But the media is to blame for some of that because of the way they conduct themselves, sometimes in times when they should not be conducting themselves that way. So we're going to try to proceed carefully, cautiously, and I hope that this is going to be beneficial. I hope you will listen carefully. Now, this is a live broadcast, so I am obviously welcome. I am welcoming you and asking you that if you have any questions or any perspective and you're listening to me live today, just use the little chat function there on the Spreaker app, and you can ask your questions and you can share your thoughts. If you are not listening to me live and you don't quite understand something that I was saying, you disagree with the perspective, if you want to have an actual dialogue, you can email me at newsif@yahoo.com, newsif@yahoo.com, or you can go to theologycentral.net, theologycentral.net. Just kind of swipe up on the page, and at the bottom right-hand corner, you'll see a little icon with a microphone. You can click on that and you can leave a voice message with your thoughts and your perspective, all right? So I don't want this to be just me speaking and I'm not listening to you. I want to hear your perspective as well, all right? So we're going to walk through this carefully, and I'm going to try to consider it. Look, there are so many different perspectives and layers to some of these situations that there is no way that I can get this there's no way I can cover everything, even if I go 3 hours. But I'm going to try to offer a more thoughtful perspective than what I have seen in the media with their little 5-minute report, 7-minute report, and they just move on. We're going to have a long form conversation about this, all right? So I hope you will hear and listen to me carefully, all right? Now, let's go through this. What I did today is when I got here, set up all of my podcast equipment, I just grabbed my iPad and opened up the notes section, and I put at the top police shootings, and I just started writing some specific points to try to help us whenever these kinds of things occur. How should we proceed? All right? So here we go. Number one. And this is so very important. And of course, this is the Theology Central podcast. So obviously, I look at things from a theological perspective. Whenever a shooting occurs, whenever someone dies because of an interaction with a police officer, when someone dies, no matter what the situation is, it's always a tragedy because a human being created in the image of God, and as Christians, we believe that all life is sacred. There's a sanctity to all life. When any time someone's life is taken for whatever the situation is, for whatever. It's not about whether the situation was right or wrong. It's just we have to first see the tragedy in it. A human being was killed. A human being's life came to an end and they entered into eternity. That is a tragedy. And so many times, instead of stopping and pausing and looking at the tragedy and the loss of life, we immediately want to start taking sides. We immediately want to start arguing. We should all be able to agree when someone dies, that's a tragedy. Now, I'm not making a judgment about whether it was right or wrong. We can just say it was a tragedy and it was horrible. And sometimes I just feel like we play lip service to that. Well, it was a tragedy. Okay, but, did you see this? Did you see this? Did you see this? What about this? What about that? What about that? Well, I think they were right. No, I think they were wrong. And then we just start engaging in the debate. Now, I know there's no easy way to pull this off, but if you can at least always stop and just acknowledge someone died, someone's daughter, someone's father, someone's brother, someone's sister, someone's mother, someone lost a loved one, someone died. It's not a video game. It's not a movie. It's not an episode of Chicago PD or SWAT or any other television show that you watch. It's real life with real human beings involved in a tragic situation, and lives are going to be impacted by that for years to come. So it's hard to stop and try to just realize the reality of the situation. It's not just something for our entertainment that we can sit around and debate. Human beings are involved, and tragedy occurred and someone died. And again, I don't want to just reduce this to just a police shooting. Whatever the tragedy may be, if there's a loss of life, don't ever forget that. Even when we're dealing with war, when people die, now you may believe that the action is justified and needed, but still human beings died. Human beings suffered. That should always bother us. And we so forget the humanity of it. We forget the human beings in it. We forget the loss of life in it. And I know it's so easy to just say that. And I'm not, and look, there's no easy way to make that occur. But if you forget that, if we overlook that, then we just reduce it to a debate topic. All right. I was on the debate team in high school. And when no matter what competition we went to, and I could go through all the different things I did in debate, but you just have a topic, and then you're depending on which side you have to debate for that particular situation, you may be for or against, whichever way you have to debate. It's just a topic to debate. And sometimes we reduce tragedy to topics to debate, and the loss of human life becomes almost secondary to. It's just a part of the story. It's just a part of the facts that we throw out there, and we just always have to start right there. All right. Now, number 2, this is very important. It's a tragedy. All right. That's number 1. Number 2, you always have to understand this: narratives, sides, emotions, and the truth. Narratives, sides, emotions, and the truth. That's exactly how I typed it out in my notes on my iPad. Narratives, sides, emotions, and the truth. Now, why is this so important? Because here's what happens. The tragedy takes place. And within seconds of the tragedy taking place, narratives begin to emerge. Like, here's the way you need to view this story. There's a narrative that emerges. Like, this is the way you view this story. This is how we're going to speak about this story. And if you pay close attention to the media, sometimes it can be very frustrating because you'll go from one news report to another news report from completely different sources using almost the exact same language, using the exact same words. And you're like, okay, so this is the narrative. This is the way this is going to be put forth. This is the way I'm supposed to look at it. And once narratives emerge, the truth is obscured. You're not going to be able to see the truth because now all you can see is the narrative. And you've got to be careful to not allow a narrative to form. You've got to say, no, I'm not going with the narrative, not going with the narrative, not going with the narrative, all right? Not immediately, all right? And then here's what happens. The narrative, think about the way this plays out. The narrative is put forth by someone out there. However the narrative emerges. I'm not trying to give the idea of some grand conspiracy where there's people sitting in some room somewhere saying, okay, we're going to create this narrative and we're going to send the memo out to everyone. I'm not going with that idea. I'm just saying a narrative emerges. That's just the fact. A narrative emerges, all right? So you have a narrative. Now, once you have a narrative, then sides are formed. So narrative emerges, sides are formed. Here's the narrative. Now, people take, I agree with that narrative, I disagree with that narrative. And then, so now you have sides. So you have a narrative emerges, sides form, and then emotions begin to grow. All right, a narrative emerges, sides form, emotions begin to grow. And while all of that is happening, guess what completely gets overlooked? Guess what's completely obscured and nobody can see it anymore? The truth. The truth becomes irrelevant to the entire situation because here's the narrative. Now you take a side. Now you have your emotions. And where's the truth? Does anyone care about the truth? Does anyone want to pursue truth? Does anyone want to find the truth? Is anyone even looking for truth? And so many times, that is what is so frustrating. And then you'll watch social media or you'll listen to maybe people, you're at work and you're having this conversation, maybe during a lunch hour or wherever you're having your conversation, and just listen. You'll start hearing people put forth their narrative. You'll see that they've taken a side. You'll hear the emotion in their voice. And guess what? Nobody seems to care about. No one seems to want to say, time out, stop. This is a tragedy. Before we start listening to narratives and taking sides, how about we just spend some time working together to get all of the facts? How about we worry about the truth? Whatever the situation is, whatever the tragedy may be, what about we find the truth? But once you get a narrative, it's almost impossible for anyone to consider the truth. Look, I'll remove this from the subject of police shootings. After 9/11 here in the United States of America, after the terrorist attacks of 9/11, obviously there was discussion. Obviously, it became obvious. I keep saying obvious. It became clear that the United States of America was going to begin to launch military strikes in Afghanistan. We were going to go to Afghanistan to try to go to after the terror groups that were supposedly responsible for the 9/11 attacks. Okay, so you have a narrative form. We were attacked. These people were responsible for the planning of this attack. All right, and so that's kind of how the narrative that becomes a narrative. Now, right in the midst of all of that, a new narrative begins to formulate. And the new narrative is, we need to worry about Iraq. Iraq is doing this, and Iraq did this, and Iraq. And you're like, well, wait a minute. Was Iraq actually connected to the 9/11 attacks? Why are we going into Iraq? You started asking some questions, but a narrative almost began to formulate, basically like, look at what happened on 9/11. We need to go into Iraq. And you're like, wait a minute. Well, they have weapons of mass destruction. Well, wait a minute. But that became the narrative. People took sides. Whether, I'm going to support the military. I'm going to support what we do because look at what happened in 9/11. Well, wait a minute. I'm going to ask some questions here. How dare you ask questions? You don't love your country. You're not patriotic. What's your problem? And then people get emotional. And guess what happened? Nobody really seemed to care about the actual truth. Well, wait a minute. Why? Are we sure we should go into Iraq? Are we sure they have weapons of mass destruction? Are we sure? And next thing you know, truth gets thrown to the side. Of course, then you know the rest of history. We go into Iraq and all of the death and destruction that occurred. But a narrative was formed. A narrative emerged. Sides were formed. Emotions begin to grow. and nobody could care about the truth. And I could go from major situation after major situation after major situation, major tragedy after major tragedy that has occurred in this country. You've seen it yourself. You know it. And you find yourself, when it's all happening, it's very hard to go, time out, stop. I don't want to hear the narrative. I don't want to take a side. I'm going to try to set my emotions aside. I just want to find the truth. Now, the media has a responsibility at that point not to be the ones helping a narrative to emerge. They are supposed to be the ones that are not taking a side. They're supposed to be the ones setting aside the emotion, going, here's what we know at this hour and at this time. Here are the facts as we know them. That's what the media is supposed to do, but they do not. They do not. In many cases, they misrepresent and they are forming the narrative and they clearly take a side. When I say the media clearly are doing the wrong thing, I'm not in every situation. Okay, I got to be careful or I'm going to create a narrative. But the media at times is very guilty in helping form the narrative and they clearly have shown that they've taken a side. And when that occurs, let me state it again. Truth is obscured. And when you can't find the truth, you are in serious trouble. All right? So we have a tragedy. That narratives form, or narratives emerge, sides form, emotions grow, and truth is obscured. You can see this play out every single time. And it is very frustrating when you're trying to say, pause, stop. No, you just can't. It's almost like you can't stop it, which only leads to great frustration, at least from my perspective, great discouragement and frustration, because it just seems like you can't have the conversation. You can't have a conversation because you immediately realize everyone has taken a side, right? So it's a tragedy. Narratives emerge, sides are formed, emotions grow, and truth is obscured. Just remember that formula, right? Then number 3, the use of force. Now, this one is going to be very specific to police shootings or anytime someone is killed in police custody. The use of force. Now, there's always, after the fact, everyone then jumps in saying, well, they shouldn't have done this, or they should have done this, or they should have just fired a warning shot, or they should have shot him in the leg, or, everyone begins to then argue about whether force should or shouldn't be used in a particular case, or how it should be used. That becomes a never-ending debate. That becomes a debate that really becomes futile, and I don't know if I can really accomplish anything. So let's go back to this basic concept. I think most people, I think everyone, I'm going to take this back. I'm going to be very dogmatic here. I think everyone would support police use of force if you or a loved one is in immediate danger and could possibly have their life taken from them by someone. You at that point would support the use of deadly force to stop the threat, to preserve life, to protect your life. Now, we can argue all day about these hypothetical situations or some situation not involving us. And when it's not involving us, it's very easy to be like, okay, well, they should have done this, or they should have done this, or they should have done this. But if it's 2:00 in the morning and someone's breaking into your house and they have a gun and they're trying to kill you or your family, you want the police to show up, you want them to show up quickly, and you want them to eliminate said threat. And I guarantee you're probably going to support the use of force. All right? And I think we usually agree that the police can use force, and we even agree that the military can use force in very specific situations. Now, from a Christian perspective, when it comes to the military, I believe in the just war doctrine, that for the military to engage in military action resulting in the death of people, that there's a very specific criteria that should be met before that war, that military action is considered just. Well, I think the same thing goes when it comes to the police department. right? That there's a criteria that should be met, that they should use force in order to, listen, prevent the loss of life, we can say it a couple of ways: to prevent the loss of life, to preserve life, to defend life, to stop someone from killing someone. And you would have to acknowledge that the police officer must be allowed to use the use of force to preserve their own life, to defend their own life. Now, I think we can all agree that there are situations where the use of force is justified. Now, again, people are going to debate maybe, well, in this situation, in this situation, in this situation. I understand that. And listen, every time the use of force occurs, there should be questions asked. There should be questions asked. Let's make this very clear. There should be questions asked. Why did they do that? Why? What led to that? There should be questions asked. But I just want us to get to the idea that at a very fundamental level, everyone agrees with the use of force when it comes to their life being in danger. When your life is in immediate danger that you could lose it, it's a clear and present danger, and that within minutes you could be dead or your child could be kidnapped or whatever the case may be. You, at that moment, no matter what your philosophical leanings may be, at that moment, you're probably going to agree and support the use of force. And I think everyone can understand that. Again, 2:00 in the morning, someone breaking into your house and they have a gun. You want the police there. You want them there immediately, and you want them to eliminate that threat. You want them to eliminate that threat. Now, it doesn't mean you want I'm not saying you're sitting there going, kill them, kill them, kill them. You just want the threat eliminated, but you're going to support the use of force to eliminate said threat if that person will not stop, place the gun down, and do what they are told. All right. And the police may not have a lot of time to make a decision in what to do, especially if you are in an immediate threat of loss of life. So I think I just want to make sure we get down to that fundamental level. The use of force, we all support it in some way, shape, or form. Now, we may disagree in specific cases where the use of force was utilized. We may have a difference of an opinion there, but a lot of that, and I hate to say this, but I think we just have to be honest, is a lot of Monday morning quarterbacking. And that's the idea that we're sports fans, after a game is over, saying, well, they should have done this and they should have done this. It's always easy after to say they should have done this and should have done that. It's very different when you're right there in the middle of the situation. I'm just saying, fundamentally, I think we can put all of ourselves in a hypothetical situation and say, okay, there, I would agree with the use of force. All right, the minute I can give you a hypothetical situation involving you or your family, and you would say, okay, I would agree with the use of force there, then that means at least you agree that the use of force is allowed in certain circumstances. All right, so we have to at least start right there, that in some situations we would not only agree with it, we would want it, we would support it, and we would defend it, especially if it involves our life. All right? So number one, it's a tragedy. Number two, narratives emerge, sides form, emotions grow, and the truth is obscured. That is and that's what we have to prevent. Number three, the use of force. Fundamentally, at a very fundamental level, we all agree that it should occur sometimes. That it can occur and should occur and sometimes in order to preserve and protect life. I think we can agree with that. Now, number four, context. What do I mean by that? Well, when we talk about hermeneutics, sometimes we joke that there are three very important rules to interpreting the Bible, and they are: number one, context. Number two, context. Number three, context. In other words, the reason we say that way is because we understand that no individual verse of the Bible can be understood without its broader context. Its textual context, the verses that come before and around it. Its broader textual context, the chapter in which that verse occurs, the book in which that occurs, the Testament. In other words, there's a textual context, there's a historical context, and we need all of that context before we can properly interpret what we are reading. Well, whenever we hear of a tragedy, whenever we hear of a police shooting, we need context. We need context. Listen, context, not opinion, not interpretation. We need context. We don't need the narrative. We don't need the sides. We don't need the emotions. We need the context. Sadly, what occurs is the media sometimes has no desire to give you the full context. And this is what drives me absolutely crazy about the media sometimes. Some great tragedy occurs where clearly narratives are forming, or narratives are emerging, sides are forming, and emotions are growing. Well, these news agencies, they have $1 million budgets, millions and millions of dollars in their budget. They have research team. They have writers. They've got so much. They've got access to everything. And so many times this is what they don't do. And I'll never understand it. Hey, today at 4 p.m. in whatever city, there was a police-involved shooting. From what we can tell right now, certain narratives are emerging. What we can tell right now is that sides are forming and emotions are growing. What we are going to do tonight at 7 p.m. is we are going to be live on the air at 7 p.m. And what we're going to do is just lay out with no interpretation. We're not going to bring in people from different sides to argue. What we're going to do is we're going to lay out all the facts as we know them right now. We're going to play for you the 911 call, unedited. We're going to play what the police has said. We're going to show you body cam. We're going to show you cell phone video footage. We're going to do so without commentary. We're going to do so without any different sides giving you their opinions. We're not going to offer any interpretations. We're just going to lay out the facts for you. We're going to show you everything we have, and then we're going at the end say, here's what we know at this date and time. Point 1, point 2, point 3, point 4. Each day, we're going to do another special broadcast where we look at what we already know, and then if there's anything we need to change, we're going to show you, and we're going to have a graphic keeping up. This is what we know. Here's what's been changed, and we're going to take you through it. Every news media agency in America can do that. Are they going to do that? Absolutely not. What do they get? Oh, here's a shooting. And then what do? They bring in supposed experts giving you their interpretation, giving you their opinions, or pushing the narrative. It doesn't help. It's garbage. We need context. So sadly, here's what you have to do. You yourself have to ignore the media. And this is what you have to do, right? Whenever, and especially this, I'm going to use this specifically for police shootings. The first thing you need to do is ignore what everyone else is saying and see if you can find a copy, an unedited copy of the 911 call. No matter what the shooting is, no matter what the situation is, the unedited 911 call. If there are multiple 911 calls, you want to listen to them. Why? Here's the reason why. This gives you an idea of the mindset or how the police officer was thinking when he was driving to the scene. Let me give you an example. If a 911 call comes in, it says, hey, there's an individual standing outside the store and he is bothering people, harassing people, asking them for money. Okay, well, then the police officers are probably going to arrive at that call thinking, oh, there's just someone out there harassing people, bothering people. And they're not going to necessarily arrive with the idea that there is an immediate threat. But if if the 911 call comes in and you listen to it and it says, hey, there's a person standing in front of the store, he's harassing people, but he has a gun. He has a gun and he's threatening people. Well, now when the police officer gets there, he's already, probably pretty much thinking, I need my gun because this person is armed. Now, that context can say so much. It can give you at least some idea of exactly what was the police thinking. And and I've seen this play out. I've seen this play out so many times. And listen, sometimes when the news media plays a 911 call, they edit certain things out. We saw this in the Trayvon Martin case. where I think it was NBC News who edited parts of the 911 call. So back when that story broke, what did I do? I grabbed every 911 call dealing with the Trayvon Martin case, every 911 call that came in, every single one. And I played them unedited. I think it was almost an hour of 911 calls with no commentary, nothing, no interruption. I just let them play, which gave kind of an idea of, okay, look at the timestamp this one came in. Look at what was look at how what was developing here. Look what was going on. Now, obviously, we know in that particular case it wasn't a police officer who was involved, but again, those 911 calls kind of gave us an idea of exactly what was happening. The news media doesn't always do that. They play a section of it. Now, here's the thing: they're 24-hour news agencies. Don't tell me they don't have time. They've got all the time in the world. They're 24 hours a day. They can do that. So guess what? You need to get the 911 call. You have to listen to it. Put it this way. If you care to make a judgment or going to have an opinion, you can't do so without the context. Get the 911 call. All right. Next, find out all the information known by the police. What do I mean by that? Very simple. Let's say it's a traffic stop. All right. What information is being relayed back to the police officers? Let me give you an example. I have owned police scanners pretty much my entire adult life. And I've learned so much by listening to police scanners. The average person doesn't listen to police scanners, and yet they want to make major judgments on what's going on. Now, I'm not here justifying any police action. I'm just telling you about gathering facts. I'll hear a traffic stop take place, right? It's just a normal traffic stop. Maybe the person was, their tail lights out. Maybe they were doing, 50 or, they were doing, 60 and a 50 mile per hour zone, whatever the case may be. And they pull them over. Immediately, what do they do when they pull them over? The police officer calls into dispatch and say, hey, traffic stop. They give them the license plates number. They want them to run that information. They may have the person's ID, whatever the case may be. And then I'll hear. What's always fascinating is when the dispatch calls the police officer back to relay information to them. And they may be, person has an outstanding warrant. This person is wanted for this. Sometimes they'll be like, whoa, what is going on? That person has committed. It's like they start giving all this information. Well, clearly at that moment, the whole tone of that traffic stop is about to change. Everything's about to change. The whole situation is about to get a whole lot different in tone. Now, the only way you're going to know that is either A, you were listening to the police scanner, B, that police scanner traffic has been recorded. Now, Broadcastify, I can't remember. I think Broadcastify used to have an archive where you could go back and say, okay, I want to listen to all the police traffic from this particular police frequency from 9 p.m. to 10 p.m. And then you can listen to all of that. And sometimes you'll find out, that police officer was just told that this person is possibly armed and dangerous and is wanted for these three things. That changes the tone of the traffic stop. I'm not saying that excuse anything, but that's information that the media sometimes won't even bother to relay to you. So it's your job to get the 911 call. It's your job to get the information known to the police. It's your look, if you're going to make a judgment, it's your job to get all of that. All right. So here's how it works. It's a tragedy. We've got to see the tragic element in it. Number two, we got to realize narratives emerge, sides form, emotions grow, and truth is obscured. All right. We've got to fight against that. Number three, the use of force. And if I give you a hypothetical situation involving you, your family, unless you're not being honest, you're going to support the use of force to preserve and protect life. That's going to be pretty much a universal thing. Number four, context. You need the 911 call. You need information known to the police. You need all the information leading up to what occurred. You need to know everything. In the Ma'Khia Bryant shooting in Ohio, the 16-year-old girl who was shot, I just watched an entire video from the 911 calls, unedited, And then I watched the police officer receive from dispatch the call to go. He gets the address, and then I watched him driving his car all the way to the scene, gets out of the car, basically holds up his hand to say what's going on, and then the chaos ensues, and then literally within 10 seconds, he's fired 4 shots, and Ma'Khia Bryant is killed. Now, that gave me the full context of everything that occurred. And it took me a while to find the video, but because the media wasn't giving me all of that context. So I got to see everything from the 911 call to dispatch telling the police officer to go to that scene, him looking at his computer screen, then driving car, literally watching him drive the car and then get out of the car. And then I see from his body cam, and then the neighbor also provided security footage showing the entire scene from a broad angle. So I looked at it, I watched everything. And that gave me fuller context. But you definitely want the context leading up to the action, right? A lot of times we want the context of the particular shooting or incident, but the broader context is all of that additional information. Now, sadly, you're going to have to be the one to go find it. Sadly, the news media, their websites are useless. They're not going to give you, here's a file of all the information. No, they don't provide that. No, it's ridiculous that in 2021, we cannot get that, the news media cannot be the source that people can tune in and get all of this information. No, they all have their narrative and they want to create conflict. That's why they bring in people in many cases with 2 different views to argue. And I don't need an argument. I need facts. So get the context. Next, number 5. So number 1, it's a tragedy. Number 2, narratives emerge, sides form, emotions grow, truth is obscured. Number 3, the use of force. Fundamentally, at some level, everyone agrees with the use of force in certain situations. We can at least agree with that. Number 4, context. We need all the context leading up to the police arriving at the scene. I need to know everything that was said. I need to know exactly what was going on. I need to know that. Then number 5, actions leading to the use of force. I need to know everything that occurred leading up to the shooting. What we typically get is the video of the shooting taking place. Usually what we get is the video of the use of force. What we don't get in many cases is everything leading up to it. This goes along with the context point. But now this one specifically, the actions leading to the shooting. What occurred? Now, I'm not justifying anything. Please hear me. Some of you think, oh, he's trying to justify the police. No, I'm trying to give you a process to use so that you don't come up with wrong conclusions and that you can actually help people not jump to wrong conclusions. All right. Now, we then need to find out everything that happened that led to the use of force. Now, we've got to deal with this. This is not victim blaming. This is just we have to deal with the facts. All right. Was a warning given? Was a warning followed? Were they resisting arrest? Were they attempting to flee? Were they attempting to hurt someone? We need to know all of those actions. I'm not saying that justifies it, right? Someone's at a traffic stop for a broken taillight, and let's just say then the next thing you know, they decide to try to run from the cops. Should the cops shoot them? Now we get back to the use of force. Now we get into when can it be used and shouldn't be used. Was anyone in danger at that particular time? Does the person have a weapon? All these questions have to be asked, but we have to at least consider, wait a minute, this was going on, this was going on, this was going on, this was going on. That leads to possibly the use of force. Why am I driving this point home? Not because, listen, so many times, with the actions leading up to the use of force, so many times this is used to try to either blame the victim and justify the cop or blame the cop and justify the victim. I think the reason we need to look at all of the actions leading up to the use of force is for this. Is it possible, and I just got to throw this out there, is it possible that the actions leading up to the use of force are far more an indicator of what happened, whether right or wrong, than the race of the individuals involved? Now, I just got to at least throw this question out there. Is it possibly the actions leading up to, maybe the police responds incorrectly to those actions? That's possible. But maybe it's the actions that create that, in other words, instead of de-escalating the situation, they escalate the situation, and then decisions are made. Maybe right, maybe wrong, but maybe that has more to do with what occurs than the race of the individuals involved. Because so many times the narrative emerges is, okay, all right, police officer shooting. Okay, here's the first thing the media seems to want to know. Who is black and who is white? Okay, so this is a situation of a white person shooting a black person. Now, I'm not saying that should not ever be considered. What I am saying is possibly before we get to the race of the individuals, we go through all of this process to say, okay, what were the actions that led to the shooting? Did that action escalate or de-escalate the situation? Did the cop do what he should to de-escalate the situation, or did he escalate the situation, or she, whatever the case may be? I just think sometimes that we don't look at the actions leading to it because we're more concerned with the optics of the situation, not the actions that lead to the situation, but it's the optics. And what do I mean by the optics? Skin color. Skin color. Now, is skin color does it contribute to the actions? Possibly. But here's the thing. When it comes to the optics of the situation, here's what I know. I cannot judge what was going through the mind of either individual. I can only judge the actions that were involved. In other words, I can't say, oh, here's a white person. They pull up at the scene, and because they're white, and immediately because they see that the suspect is African-American or whatever race may be, they immediately pull the gun and shoot. And they were motivated by race. Is it possible that their action had a lot to do with the actions leading up to that point? Now, I'm not saying that makes it right. Listen to what I'm saying. I'm not blaming a victim or justifying a cop. I'm saying that this sometimes gets overlooked. We just want that optic. Look, white, black. Look at the optics. And I'm like, what about the actions? Well, that person was told 5 times to put their hands up. That person was told 5 times to drop their weapon. That person ran from the cop. That person did this. That person did that. Now, I'm not saying it justifies it, but isn't that not an important element of the story? Should that not at least be considered? Should you, the viewing public, should you not be given all of that information? I will argue it must all be considered. I will argue it all must be considered. All right? Next. Then you have the shooting, or you have the use of force. So it's a tragedy. Then you have the narrative. Narratives emerge, sides form, emotions grow, truth obscured. Use of force. We talked about that. Then you need context. You need the actions leading to the use of force. You need the actions, right? Then you have the shooting itself. Now, once you have the shooting itself, here's what you need. You need every piece of video evidence available to you, including the actions leading to it. But you need every vantage point of that shooting. You need the body cam. You need cell phone. And don't draw any conclusions until you've seen every angle. You've seen everything. Don't draw a conclusion. Then you have the shooting itself, or the use of force. Now, after all of that, then you have judgment. Then you have a judgment that has to be made. You're going to make a judgment. All right? I'm getting notifications on my iPad. You're going to then make a judgment. Now listen, guess what that judgment can do? This is what you can judge, and this is what you cannot judge. You can judge all of those facts that you've just spent time gathering. That judgment can only judge the facts. Here's what we know. Here's the information. Here are the actions that led to it. Here's the shooting. Here's all the camera angles. Here's the 911 call. We've got all. Now, you're not worried about narratives. You're not worried about sides. You're not worried about emotions. You're like, here's it. Now, guess what? Sometimes, based off all the evidence, your judgment can only go, this is as much as I can say. Here's what I cannot say. But guess the one thing that it's almost impossible to judge. Motives. Motivations. You can't judge what's going on in someone's mind. You can't start judging that. You can judge the action, yes. You can judge the outcome, yes. You can judge all of the information that you have been found and probably in your own research. You cannot judge what's going on inside a person. There's a limit to what we can judge. This is the whole idea and the Gospel of Matthew about judge not lest ye be judged. The idea there is not to never make a judgment because later on in that chapter it talks about being, watching out for false teachers. Well, you have to make a judgment that someone's a false teacher. So it's the idea of making an incorrect judgment, a wrong judgment. There's things you cannot judge. It's just impossible. It's just impossible. I can't say, well, they did that because the person was that color. I can't say that. I may not be able to say it was racism. I can say, based off all the evidence, that was a horrible, horrible shooting, and the police officer completely handled that incorrectly. I may be able to say that, or I may be able to say, well, that police officer had very little choice and other to do that. But I don't have to worry. Why? I'm not worried about the color of the skin. Now, yes, if the police officer shows up, starts throwing out racial slurs, and he has a history of being a racist, and you find out he's a member of the KKK, then by all means, the racial part should come into play. But in many cases, it just happens to be they're called to a scene, they show up at a scene, all of these factors come together, the use of deadly force happens. I'm not saying that does not mean that race was a motivator. And for you to say that it means you have some insight into a person's thoughts, emotions, and motives, which you probably do not possess. And you would not want someone to do that to you. That is very important. And then, lastly, the media. At some point, very early on, the media is going to step in. And sadly, the media does not always conduct themselves in a correct way. Let me just give you an example. Now, I had all kinds of audio clips I wanted to play for you, but I'll just do it this way. Here's an example. NBC Nightly News. NBC Nightly News is under fire for editing out key part of the 911 call before Ma'Khia Bryant shooting. Please note, remember I tell you the media always edits the 911 calls? Drives me absolutely crazy that they do so. I don't even think they should bleep out the cuss words. I think the 911 calls should be played with or without offense to friend or foe. I don't care if it uses a racial slur. I don't care what it is in it. I don't care how bad. It should be played on the media. There should be some exemption from FCC rules that it can be played because you want to hear exactly what led the police to that particular situation. You want to hear this. All right, so here we go. NBC Nightly News under fire for editing out key part of 911 call before Ma'Khia Bryant shooting. Clip of call omitted woman telling police grown girls were trying to stab us. So in other words, the 911 call said, hey, there's these girls trying to stab us. Now that creates okay, I got to get to the scene. Someone's going to get killed. Someone's about to get stabbed. That changes the whole way of thinking. That was edited from NBC News. Here's the story. Critics bashed NBC Nightly News Wednesday after the network's flagship evening news program omitted a key details from a report on the police-involved shooting of Ma'Khia Bryant in Columbus, Ohio. And I believe I am saying her name correctly, and I mean this in all sincerity. If I'm saying her name incorrectly, please let me know, because I do not in any way want to show any disrespect to anyone and involved in a horrible tragedy like this. All right. Media Research Center news analyst Nicholas and I'm not going to pronounce his last name, called out NBC News for editing out a portion of a frantic 911 call in which a woman is heard saying, "It's these grown girls over here trying to fight us, trying to stab us. Get here now." NBC did air a brief audio clip from the call, which the woman shouts, "We need a police officer here now." All right, see, that's all they play. We just need a police officer here now. That's all they played. The Media Research Center drew attention to the portion of the police body cam footage shown by NBC, which he noted did not show viewers the knife in the attacker's hand just before the shots. So when they did show body cam footage, they didn't show the part where she had a knife in her hand. Now, I don't know if you've seen the video footage. It's crazy. Again, I've watched all of it. It's crazy. It's insane of what's going on. The police officer exits his vehicle, and as he's walking up, you see a girl in pink, and then you see a gentleman, it looks like, kicks a woman to the ground. He kicks this woman to the ground, and he's like, whoa, whoa. He gets ready to go to the woman who's been kicked to the ground, and all of a sudden another female, from what we can tell, Ma'Khia Bryant, pushes a girl in pink against the car. And it looks like, I think it's her right hand. She has a knife and she's getting ready to come with this like stabbing motion. Her hand is drawn back. It looks like she's going to stab. And then the cop fires 4 times. It's frantic. It's crazy. It all happens in the split of a second. The entire situation was already completely out of control once the officer arrived on the scene. But as soon as he gets out of the car, the scene goes from whatever out of control it was to a different level. It's crazy, but they did not show that. Now, most of the images shown, you can clearly see that she has a knife in her hand and she's got it pulled back in a way like she's getting ready to stab this female in pink who's wearing a pink like jumpsuit. All right, so for some reason, NBC left that out, all right? Here's how it's reported in their report, speaking of NBC, and their report on the officer-involved shooting in Columbus, Ohio. NBC Nightly News deceptively edited the 911 call to leave out the part where the caller says a girl was trying to stab us. They don't show viewers the knife in the attacker's hand just before the shots. All right? So, however, the segment did not hide the fact that she had a knife. So they didn't hide that fact. All right. And I quote from the report, a police officer shot and killed a 16-year-old black girl in Columbus, Ohio, saying she was threatening others with a knife. NBC anchor Lester Holt began the report, saying that she was threatening officers or others with a knife. Why didn't they show the clear image of her with the knife getting ready to stab the other female? Why would they not do that? Why would they? Because it's a narrative. It's a narrative. Throughout the report, a graphic at the bottom of the screen read, "Police fatally shoot 16-year-old girl holding knife." And still an image from the body cam footage showed a knife on the ground. So the graphic said she was holding a knife. The video image they show doesn't show her holding the knife. And not only that, they just say holding a knife. Like she was just standing there holding a knife and she got shot. No, she wasn't just holding a knife. She was wielding a knife and about to possibly stab someone else. That's very different. Now, you don't have to interpret that. You don't have to say that. You don't even have to agree that that justifies the shooting. But you have to give all of those facts. All right? As it was reported out, ABC World News Tonight and the CBS Evening News both aired the portion of the 911 call that includes the stabbing reference, and both zoomed in on the footage showing more clearly that Bryant was holding a knife during the altercation. So the other news agencies did they gave more facts. They gave more information. NBC's Nightly News was slammed on social media in light of the stark comparison with the program's competitors. Really something to watch the comparison of how ABC News responsibly covered the story and how NBC left out critical details. And then they go on and there's far more. And then you've got all the tweets and everyone talking about it. But the bottom line is NBC News definitely did not accurately present the information. They did not accurately present the information. So what do we learn about this from the media aspect? You got to listen to me carefully. Whatever the big story is, I don't care if it's supposed election fraud. I don't care if it's something to do with the pandemic. You cannot rely on one media source. What do I mean by one media source? In other words, you cannot just rely. If you listen to Fox News, you can't just rely on Fox News. If you watch MSNBC, you cannot just rely on MSNBC. Whatever the event was, you've got to do your own independent research to gather all the information that the media is not showing you or only showing you edited parts of. And then number two, you've got to listen to how multiple news agencies are reporting on it. You got to go from ABC to CBS to NBC to Fox to MSNBC to CNN to BBC to Sky News. You've got to look at it all. And I know you say that's ridiculous that I have to do that. It is. It is ridiculous. But if you don't do that, then you're not going to get facts. You're not going to get the truth. You're just going to get a narrative. You're going to get sides. You're going to get emotions, and the truth is going to be obscured. And I believe as a Christian, it's your responsibility to get the facts so that you can be salt and light to a world who needs the facts desperately. And you cannot be the one out there spreading wrong and misleading information. Give you another example of misleading information. One other. Oh, I had so many audio clips I wanted to play for you, but that's okay. Here is an example. All right. All right, this is from USA Today. USA Today. Fact check. Ma'Khia Bryant did not approach police officers at the scene before the shooting. It was reported that Ma'Khia Bryant called 911, and then when the police officer arrived, she comes walking to the police officer and he shoots her. That is how the narrative has been going around. Well, here's NBC, or not NBC, USA Today, and this is what they say. The claim, Ma'Khia Bryant was shot after approaching officer to explain her situation. That is the claim, that Ma'Khia Bryant was shot after approaching officers to explain her situation. All right? It's been almost 3 days since police shot and killed 16-year-old Ma'Khia Bryant in Columbus, Ohio on April the 20th. In that span of time, we have seen Bryant's early and violent death cause protest, mourning, and continued debate over police violence against Black Americans. There's been protest. And some of them have gotten, I won't say completely violent, but they've definitely gotten rough. And those people out there protesting, in many cases, have no idea of the facts. They've not done their research. They heard a narrative. They took a side. They got emotional, and the truth was obscured. I cannot repeat that formula enough, all right? While police conduct their investigation, many details remain unclear. Misinformation about the incident has circulated widely on social media. Let me say that again. Misinformation about the incident has circulated widely on social media. Christians should not be a part of the circulation of misinformation. You should be the one going, stop. Wait. Let's get all the information. Let's go through this process. We need context. We need all of this. USA Today reported one widely shared post falsely stated that Bryant was not holding a knife at the time of the shooting. So USA Today themselves reported a widely shared post falsely stating that Bryant was not holding a knife at the time of the shooting. That was even reported, that she wasn't holding a knife. That is fraudulent and false. That's just false. Again, I'm not making a judgment about the shooting. I'm saying that's just false. You see why you need the information? You say, I'm getting animated now. Now I start getting angry because you can't be reporting that kind of stuff. If you don't know, you can't say that. Another post shared on the evening of April the 20th claims Bryant was shot after approaching an officer at the scene. And here's the post. After being attacked by some girls in her neighborhood, 16-year-old Ma'Khia Bryant called the Columbus Police Department for help. After police made the scene, Ma'Khia approached the officer to explain her situation, and the police shot her around 4 times. See, that's how it was being reported. She called for help. She came to explain the situation, and they just shot her. And she didn't even have a knife in her hand. None of that currently seems to support the information that we currently have. All right. Now, Columbus officials have not yet clarified several details of the case, including whether Bryant made the 911 call. Now, we don't know if she made the 911 call or not. We don't. That still seems to be under dispute. But the claim about approaching the police before the shooting is incorrect. Body cam footage and video from a neighbor's security camera shows Bryant did not approach officers for assistance. And that is true. She did not approach it. In fact, what you'll see, again, and I challenge you to watch the whole video footage. What I'm going to do is I think what I'm going to do is post a video on theologycentral.net, in the blog section. I'm going to embed a video that shows from the 911 call to the police officer showing up. It is violent. It's not nice to see. There's some extreme language, but you need to see it so that you can say that's what happened. All right? Now, from what I have seen, the police officer gets out of the car. Again, a man kicks a girl. She goes flying to the ground. The cop seems to be getting ready to go to the girl on the ground when all of a sudden he looks over and it appears to be Ma'Khia Bryant. That's who has been identified as being the female. She has a knife in her hand. She doesn't come to her cop. She doesn't come to the cop. She doesn't come explain her situation. She doesn't come saying, I need help. None of that. She's pushing a girl against a car who appears to be unarmed from everything that we can tell as of right now. And she's got a knife and it looks like she's getting ready to stab her. The police officer yells and immediately shoots 4 times, putting Ma'Khia Bryant down to the ground, laying there in the driveway, kind of the driveway almost to the right at the edge of the road. It's horrible to watch. Horrible to watch. Horrible. There's nothing. It's a tragedy. But all I'm saying is whatever you think about the shooting requires the process of going through all of those steps. So let me go through them one more time and we will stop. All right. I hope this has been helpful. I hope. I don't know if it has been, but hopefully it's been helpful. So number 1, we start with the human tragedy, loss of life. Next, we realize narratives are going to form, or narratives are going to emerge, I should say. Sides will form, emotions will rise, and the truth will be obscured. Your job as a Christian who wants to hopefully be able to speak about these things in a reasonable, rational way, and just as an individual not wanting to believe wrong things or share wrong things, it's your job to throw aside the narrative, don't take sides, lay aside your emotions, and try to find the truth. Then we have to start with the idea that if there's a tragedy here that involves the use of force, we have to at least acknowledge that in some situations you would be very supportive of the use of force, just as I would. Right? Next, we have to go spend hours finding all the context. We need all of the 911 calls, not just one. We need every 911 call that came in about that incident. Every single one that came into the situation. And the Trayvon Martin case, you've got 911 calls coming from the person involved in the incident with Trayvon. You've got people who are looking out their window calling 911. You've got so many different 911 calls that came into that situation. You need to hear them all. Most of the time, the average person never hears them all, or they hear an edited version, all right? So 911 calls, and then you need to know all the information that the police is being given while arriving at the scene, in the traffic stop. You need to know all the information they have, because that at least gives you some idea of what's going on. Then we need to know all of the actions leading up to the use of force, all the actions, everything that was done. Was resisting, was orders given? Did the police act like a jerk and try to provoke? Everything. You need every detail. No detail should be left out. Then you have the shooting itself. Now, and that one specifically relates to shooting. Okay, or the use of force. Wherever the use of force takes place, whatever the use of force is, you need to then see that from every single angle available to you. Then you can make some kind of judgment, right? But remember, there's things you can judge, there's things you cannot judge. And then lastly, the media. The media. Do not allow the media to give you a false narrative and realize no one single media source is sufficient. You must listen to all of them. right? Because you've got situations where NBC does something that's, wait, what are they doing? And you've got situations where Fox has been busted. I mean, look at how Fox handled the election fraud and all of that. Just putting complete nonsensical claims out there. They're responsible for that. You've got to listen to every side. Sadly, there shouldn't be sides. Sadly, the media should go do these long-form discussions where they go through every piece of evidence without interpretation and without making any claims, saying, here's what we know at this hour. It's, like, let's say the shooting occurred at 4 p.m. Let's say it occurred at 4 p.m. At 7 p.m., they should say, here's what we currently know. We're not interpreting any of this. Here's what we know. It's 9 p.m. Here's the facts that have changed. And just keep giving the facts. Here's all the 911 calls. Here's all the body cam footage unedited. We're not going to offer any interpretation. We're not going to bring anybody in here to try to interpret it. We're going to let you watch it and see it and hear it. Every media company can do that. But they don't. All right, I'll stop right there. Police shootings. Ma'Khia Bryant, 16-year-old, is gone. She's no longer with us. A tragic end of life. Sounding like possibly a very difficult life. Sounds like it. Nothing good comes from that. However, sometimes the use of force is required in order to protect and preserve life. And then the media sometimes creates situations that make everything worse. There you go. I wanted to play, I don't even know how many audio clips. I have like 5 audio clips I wanted to play. I will try to get the video embedded to theologycentral.net and the blog section. I will try to do that here in just a minute so that if you need that, you have it available to you. Please be careful of false claims, even by the media that make the claims. Look, it's always easy when they make a retraction, right? It's great that they make a retraction. But the retraction usually comes after the damage has already been done, and everybody remembers the false reporting and not the truth. And I've already seen video of protesters making just absolutely outlandish claims about what happened in that shooting that's not accurate. Now, again, you still may disagree with what the police did. I'm not here to dispute that. I'm saying we just have to get the facts, and hopefully you can appreciate that. You can email me, newsif@yahoo.com, newsif@yahoo.com. Thanks for listening to this hour and 12-minute discussion trying to give you a process that you can modify and use in order to try to find the truth and not be blinded by narratives. Thanks for listening. God bless.